The marble hallway of Presswick Academy of Music shimmered under golden lights as laughter echoed near the main stage. A group of well-dressed students turned to watch a black janitor pushing his mop cart. A worn violin case balanced on top. "Yo, look at that!" One boy smirked. "The janitor thinks he's part of the orchestra." Another chuckled. "Maybe he's here to tune our toilets." Their laughter bounced off the polished walls. Deshaun Washington, mid-40s, paused. His uniform sleeves were rolled, showing hands rough from years of cleaning floors that others proudly walked on. He said nothing. Instead, he placed the mop aside, opened the case, and ran a thumb along the strings, the faint sound trembling to the corridor like a ghost from another life. A hush rippled through the hall. For a heartbeat, even the laughter froze. Then one of the students scoffed. "Play something, janitor. Let's hear your trash sing." Deshaun's calm eyes lifted. "One day," he said softly, "you might." And with that, he closed the case and walked away, leaving silence louder than their insults. If this already made your blood boil, hit like and subscribe right now, because stories like this are still happening, and the world needs to hear them. Night settled over Presswick Academy, and the marble halls finally quieted. The only sound was the soft squeak of wheels as Deshaun Washington pushed his cleaning cart past darkened classrooms. He stopped outside practice room 7 when a painful screech cut through the silence, a violin being played by trembling hands. Through the small window, a young black boy, maybe 10, fought to keep his bow steady. His name tag read Marcus. Frustration welled in the boy's eyes as he dropped the bow. "I can't do this," he whispered. Deshaun hesitated, then gently knocked. "Mind if I help for a second?" Marcus blinked. You play?" Deshaun smiled faintly. "Used to. Long time ago." He picked up the violin with reverence, adjusted the bridge, and drew the bow once. Pure, clean sound filled the room like light through glass. Marcus's eyes widened. "That was beautiful. Music's not about perfect notes," Deshaun said softly. "It's about telling the truth." For the next few minutes, janitor and boy practiced together. Bow angles, breathing, emotion. By the time they stopped, the sound coming from Marcus's violin wasn't perfect, but it was alive. The next morning, the sun poured to the glass walls of practice room 7. Deshaun was showing Marcus how to hold the bow when the door burst open. "Excuse me, what is going on here?" Ethan Whitmore, the academy's lead instructor, strode in wearing his silver suit and arrogance like armor. Marcus froze. Deshaun calmly lowered the violin. "I was just helping the boy fix his grip, sir." Ethan's laugh sliced the air. "Helping? You mop floors, not teach students. Who told you to touch that instrument?" Marcus whispered. "He plays really well, sir." "Enough!" Ethan barked. "You think this is some street corner where anyone can pretend to be a musician?" Deshaun's voice stayed low. "Talent doesn't come from uniforms, Mr. Whitmore." The instructor's face hardened. "It comes from discipline and education, things you clearly lack. Clean this room if you must, but stay away from my students." Marcus's eyes filled with confusion and shame. Deshaun picked up his mop, shoulders straight. "Yes, sir." He left without another word, the sound of his cart wheels echoing through the hall, steadier than his heartbeat, quieter than his anger. If this happened right in front of you, what would you do? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. And if you want justice as much as I do, hit subscribe. The next day, Presswick Academy buzzed with excitement. It was a regional youth competition, velvet seats packed, cameras flashing, parents whispering about whose child would win. At the back of the hall, Deshaun Washington quietly polished the railings, his faded uniform blending into the shadows. From the judges' table, Ethan Whitmore sat proudly, smoothing his designer tie. Beside him, a confident white girl tuned her pristine violin. Ethan's favorite student, Ashley Carter. She was expected to win easily, but Deshaun's eyes searched the crowd until he found Marcus sitting with his parents, clutching the same old rental violin they practiced with last night. The boy caught his gaze and smiled nervously. One by one, performers took the stage. Polite applause followed each. Then, when Marcus's name was called, a ripple of whispers spread. That's the janitor's kid's friend. Ethan rolled his eyes, jotting notes before the boy even played. Marcus stepped into the spotlight. His hands trembled, while shaking against the strings until he closed his eyes and remembered Deshawn's words. The first note soared through the hall like a cry from the heart. Every whisper died. Even Ethan's pen stopped moving. Gasps rippled through the audience as the final applause faded. Before anyone could leave, a woman in an elegant burgundy suit entered through the side aisle, her silver hair gleaming under the stage lights. The announcer's tone shifted instantly. Ladies and gentlemen, music critic Lorraine Jenkins is here. Every judge straightened in their seat, especially Ethan Whitmore, whose forced smile hit his nerves. Lorraine's eyes scanned the hall and stopped when she saw Deshawn Washington, standing quietly by the exit, still holding a cleaning rag. She froze. "Deshawn?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The crowd turned to look. Ethan frowned. "You know the janitor?" Lorraine's tone sharpened. "Janitor?" This man was once the most gifted violinist I ever taught. Deshawn Washington won the National Young Artist Award 25 years ago. A stunned silence fell. Ethan's smirk collapsed. Lorraine stepped closer. "You let one of America's greatest lost musicians mop your floors." Whispers rippled through the audience like wildfire. Deshawn's eyes lowered. "Ma'am, please." But Lorraine turned to the judge's table. "I request he be allowed to play. Right now. On that stage." Ethan stammered. "That's highly irregular." She cut him off. "So is burying talent under racism and arrogance." All eyes turned to Deshawn, and he slowly nodded. The hall went silent as Deshawn Washington stepped onto stage, still wearing his janitor's uniform, the name patch glinting under the spotlight. He borrowed Marcus's old violin. It was worn and humble, yet his hands held it like gold. He closed his eyes. For a moment, time itself held its breath. Then came the first note, soft, aching, pure. The melody rose and felt like a confession, every stroke of the bow carrying 25 years of silence, struggle, and dignity. Students who once laughed now stared in disbelief. Parents leaned forward. Even Ethan Whitmore forgot to blink. The violin wept and sang, anger melting into grace, sorrow blooming into beauty. Every emotion Deshawn had buried beneath mops and buckets spilled into the air, filling the hall with something sacred. When the final note faded, there was no applause, only stunned quiet. Then, slowly, the audience rose to their feet. Marcus ran to the stage, hugging him tightly. "I told him you could play." Deshawn smiled faintly, eyes wet. "You never doubted me, kid." Lorraine stepped forward, voice breaking. "You just reminded everyone what real music sounds like." The applause thundered now, roaring unstoppable, like justice itself had finally taken the microphone. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the academy windows as reporters gathered outside. Overnight, the video of Deshawn Washington's performance had gone viral. 2 million views. Headlines calling him the janitor who made the world listen. Inside, the Academy's board offered him a teaching position on the spot. For the first time in decades, Deshawn walked those same marble halls not with a mop, but with violin case in hand. He looked to the classroom window where Marcus practiced, smiling with new confidence. "Keep playing," Deshawn said softly. "Make sure they never forget our sound." Later that week, he stood beside Lorraine Jenkins as she announced a new scholarship fund for underprivileged musicians, the Hidden Harmony Project. Deshawn watched the crowd of young faces and felt something rise in his chest, not pride, but peace. He had cleaned these floors for years, but tonight he had cleaned something much bigger, the dirt of prejudice that had buried his music. He lifted his violin once more and whispered, "This time they'll hear every note." If you believe this should never happen again, share this now. And to my USA, UK, and Canadian viewers, your voice is power. Use it.